Thanks for tuning in. I'm trying to cover a few points today and give some detailed background information. For people in a rush, I will flash up a link now which will jump you straight to the film close-up of a Speedmaster running and working on the Apollo 17 mission. If you can spare the time, no pun intended, in this video I'm trying to cover 4 main points. Some background information on how we have been blessed with close-up footage of a Speedy working in an Apollo command module, Apollo 17, on its way to the moon, a nod to other brands which flew on Apollo, in this instance Rolex. For die-hard Speedy fans, some discussion around the bizarre fact that this only close-up film footage of a Speedmaster in space features an 861 and not 321 Apollo Speedmaster. Lastly, I'm looking at an open-ended mystery. Is there a missing flown extra Speedmaster or an unrecognised EVA Speedmaster from the Apollo 17 mission? I should also say at this point that pictures in video film are mostly courtesy of NASA and the Smithsonian Institute, and everything here is shown for educational purposes only. I don't monetize my videos. I first became aware of the films when I was researching a Speedmaster owned by Ron Evans, which was up for auction. Ron was the command module pilot on Apollo 17, which was our last mission to the moon in December 1972. It was a very unusual watch, as all of the NASA Speedmasters have a serial number and from the Apollo era remain the property of the US government, so how could this watch be up for auction? It turned out it was not supposed to have been and may not have been worn on the mission. It was actually part of an experiment. The first version of this experiment was run on Apollo 14. It is called the Heat Flow and Convection Experiment, and you can download the full report. It is actually a really important experiment to validate, amongst other things, if surface tension and orbital movement is enough to generate thermal convection in a zero-G environment. The experiment was carried out in the command modules by the command module pilots, I think on the return flight from the moon on Apollo 14 and on the outward trip to the moon for Apollo 17. The experiments were filmed by 16mm DAC data acquisition cameras, which can be set to run at an appropriate speed for the task in hand, in this case slightly slower to capture the colour-coded data points of the experiment. You can see here a picture of the Apollo 14 apparatus, which is also detailed on the flight stowage list, part number R72350, weighing 6.9 pounds, and stored in location A8 at launch. There are many reports available free online from each Apollo mission. Here are the stowage lists from Apollo 17 as an example. For Apollo 14, the 3 crew had their officially issued Speedmaster chronographs on nylon Velcro straps. As shown on the stowage list, these were worn en crew. Any timing of this experiment on Apollo 14 would have been done using their personal chronographs. It is worth remembering how rudimentary a lot of the equipment was, as demonstrated by this 2-stage mission egg timer, which was also used on all the Apollo missions. Notice the use of Velcro on the back of this timer. This is one from Apollo 12, which would have been used to anchor it down. So first off, we have the slightly enhanced and speed adjusted 16mm data acquisition camera film from Apollo 14. You can see what I think is a NASA Velcro watch strap, SEB 121-00030-202. So an official Speedmaster is on the case, but also in shot is a lovely Pepsi GMT. Speedy Phil on the Omega forum validated a while back that Stuart Rosser, the command module pilot on Apollo 14, took a GMT Rolex amongst his personal possessions. On each mission the astronauts were allowed kit bags. Weight varied but up to 1.5 kilograms, so some did wear personal items as well as the officially sanctioned kit like the Speedmaster chronographs. I do imagine that they still used a Speedmaster stopwatch to time the heat flow experiment on these missions. You can see personal preference bags listed on the stowage list, and here is an example of Gene Cernan's flown kit bag from Apollo 17. I imagine the atmosphere could get a little rich after a few days in space, so I think anything like scented soap was also in demand from the kit bag. Apollo 15 and 16 did not carry a heat flow experiment, but on Apollo 17 the command module pilot Ron Evans was tasked to run an updated and improved experiment. Here are the details on that updated apparatus, and they have added a dedicated NASA-approved Speedmaster chronograph, which must have been in part based on feedback from the previous experiment carried out in Apollo 14. Jumping missions, the Smithsonian Institute, supported by AutoCAD, have put up 3D models of the Apollo 11 command module, and I have used a cutaway from an old flight magazine, along with this other information, with arrows added, showing the approximate storage and mounting locations, so I can show you the A8 storage area and the approximate location of the experiment when it was carried out. The stowage area A8 is at the bottom of the command module, aft bulkhead, the heat shield end. When unpacked and mounted, you can look directly down from the middle couch in launch position below the footrest to see the experiment location. Note the couches can be folded or adjusted into a number of seat positions. The hip pan of the centre couch can be disconnected and the couch pivoted around the head beam and laid on the aft bulkhead floor of the command module. This would have provided more room for the astronauts to stand and easier access to the side hatch for EVA activity. The experiment was mounted to the left of the guidance in navigation systems. Here's a cutaway graphic showing the guidance in navigation systems, plus a shot of Jim Lovell in Apollo 8 using that same navigation equipment. Here is also a shot looking down from the centre seat position of Apollo 11, which shows the famous graffiti tribute to the Columbia left there by Michael Collins. Hopefully this has explained the location of the heat flow experiments from Apollo 14 and 17, which were temporarily mounted with wire spring hangers on the left-hand side of the navigation equipment area. Ironically, it is not too far from the second command module, 16-bit word length, 15 data bit and 1 parity bit DSKY guidance computer. You can download an app to find out how laborious it is to enter programs and see why quality mechanical chronographs were there for a serious purpose, like timing the heat flow. The Apollo guidance computer was accessed through the DSKY interface units. There were 2 in the command module. Verbs and nouns, obviously this was state-of-the-art technology back then. It's in error at the moment. Great app, by the way, you can download and have a play yourself. So if we try verb 1, 6, noun 3, 6, enter. So looks like 11:01 and 9 seconds is the current time. If you look here, the vintage 145.012, the Speedmaster type worn by Michael Collins when he was in the command module, just straightforward for the time. And obviously if you need to do a chronograph function, you've got hours and minutes, seconds and minutes recorded really quickly and simply. I mean, just going back to the DSKY here, verb 1, 6, noun 1, 7, enter. That should be altitude, but you can see a amazing piece of kit for the time, but quite laborious and clumsy compared to your modern TomTom. And as mentioned, there's instructions in someone's created this app. I recommend you to have a play and just understand why mechanical watches were so critical. You can see why wrist watches, mechanical watches, were considered essential approved kit on the missions, and why they added a dedicated timing chronograph for the upgraded heat flow experiment on Apollo. So back to Apollo 17 and the heat flow experiment. There is plenty of information about how in the late 60s Omega moved from the 321 column wheel to the cam actuated 861, now evolved to the 1861A movement. The modern Speedmaster remains approved for spaceflight and is still worn by the International Space Station crews during launch and return missions from Russia. Apollo 17 flew late in 1972, some 3 years after the movement change, so the watch purchased for the experiment had an 861 and not 321 movement. I should say it's currently believed that all the official NASA crew issue and crew-worn Speedmasters from the Apollo missions, certainly the ones worn on the moon, were 321 caliber. Because the heat flow experiment was a close-up DAC data acquisition camera recorded experiment, it is ironic the only close-up footage we have of a working Speedmaster in space from Apollo is actually the more modern 861 movement. And here is that film, speed adjusted and close-ups added, 5 minutes of a Speedmaster doing its job in the Apollo 17 command module, which was called America, on its way to the moon, our last manned mission to the moon. There's no sound in most of this clip, although there is some on the last few minutes before we go on to the next section of this video. Thanks to NASA for making so much of the Apollo archive available online. Measuring time was critical on the missions. Wristwatches were very important and every second counted. It's demonstrated by the Apollo 17 landing audio. You can also see someone at mission control with their wristwatch holding their head, waiting for confirmation of the LEM landing.
10 feet. 10 feet. Contact. Stop, push. Engine stop. Engine arm. Proceed. Command override off. Boat control ahead. Hold. Pings auto. Okay, Houston, the Challenger has landed.
I think at this point it's worth revisiting the types of Speedmaster watch bands used on Apollo, as it's relevant to some of the pictures and information coming up. Just quickly talking about watch straps. Obviously you've got the type of watch strap that would come fitted from the manufacturer. This is a vintage 145012, the type worn by Michael Collins. This is actually a slightly more modern strap than would have been originally fitted, but still a reasonable copy of a vintage style strap. This is a more modern 3570.5000 Speedmaster. This would have the 1861A movement. The vintage one would have the famous 321 movement, but they're both similar in aesthetic and design. Externally, and obviously you've got the similar type straps. The more modern straps now are moving to screw connectors for the links, but you get the picture of what they look like. Then you had the NASA specific straps. So these were made so you could wear them adjustable Velcro, and all had a part number, and basically could be adjusted quite easily and worn outside of the pressure suit. And this Gene Cernan, last man on the moon, is nicely demonstrating for us here. As you can see in many of the pictures, he's got his Speedmaster on the outside of his pressure suit, and when they were on EVA and even inside the command module and the lunar excursion module, you could use these nylon straps. You've got the spring bar location for the watch itself. In addition, you had the kind of NASA strap, if you like, JB Champion bracelet. A lot of times you'll see pictures of astronauts using this style of bracelet. Very easy to adjust. This is something which I'll come on to in terms of some interesting pictures from the Apollo 17 mission, and hopefully this quick bit of extra video just explains some of the differences, but I would recommend you do your own research online. There's a lot of really detailed information on these. Back to the stowage lists, and for Apollo 17, interestingly you can see the 3 official Speedmaster chronographs, but unlike Apollo 14 there are 4 nylon watch bands listed, with an extra watch band for the command module pilot Ron Evans. There are some wonderful shots from Apollo 17 showing the Speedmasters on their NASA nylon strap, Gene Cernan on the moon, plus Ron Evans during his deep space EVA extra vehicle activity when he went to recover film magazines on the return trip in the command module. I mentioned that the Speedmaster used for the heat flow experiment was gifted to Ron Evans and auctioned. There is a letter of provenance which included mention of a Velcro metal backing piece for mounting the watch. Looking at the video, the watch is moved early on, the Velcro is visible underneath, and the backing metal lug is also visible. The auction watch did not have any signs of metal to metal glue on its case, and part of me wonders if this was just Velcro with a basic glue for the experiment. I also wonder why Ron Evans was issued the additional watch strap, and if the crew would have been bothered to change straps in play with spring bars in 0G. It has been shown that Gene Cernan had 2 Speedmasters, one issued for Apollo 17 and one worn on a JB Champion bracelet as a backup and maybe a good luck charm from a previous mission. You can see them in these pictures. He clearly wore the older watch under his pressure suit during his moonwalks on a JB Champion bracelet. You can also see the same bracelet on his Apollo 10 crew photo, again worn on his left wrist. Now back to Ron, with his spare NASA strap. In some pictures from the command module he appears to be wearing a Speedmaster with a standard OEM Omega strap. Was this a personal watch, or did he switch straps for the Deep Space EVA? Is it even feasible he could have used the heat flow experiment Speedmaster watch? There are some interesting threads and some very knowledgeable people on omegaforums.net, and I've used information from Speedy Phil and TLI Guy as part of preparing this video. If you're an Omega fan, I recommend that you do join that forum. I also have here a current list of watches flown on Apollo 17 as created by Speedy Phil. When you look at the crew photo, you can see that watches were important. And when you look at the number of Speedmasters on Apollo 17, currently our last manned deep space mission and our last mission to the moon, it's fitting that on the 50th anniversary year of the Apollo 11 moon landing, Omega have chosen to model Gene Cernan's 321 movement flown Speedmaster for them to relaunch the famous 321 movement at some point during the current year 2019. I hope you have enjoyed this video, and as always, thanks for watching.